In 1895, the United States government was hours away from bankruptcy. The Treasury's gold reserves were entirely depleted, leaving the nation teetering on the edge of a catastrophic default. President Grover Cleveland was paralyzed. The traditional government solution, selling bonds to the American public, would take months to organize. He didn't have months. He barely had hours. That's when John Pierpont Morgan boarded a train to Washington. He bypassed standard protocol, walked directly into the White House, and aggressively pitched his own private bailout scheme directly to the president. This visualization shows the sheer speed of Morgan's execution. Once Cleveland signed the agreement, Morgan wired his syndicate in New York. In just 22 minutes, they purchased $65 million in gold bonds, instantly filling the deficit hole and rescuing the economy. Those 22 minutes terrified the public. It proved that a single private citizen had amassed more decisive authority and financial capability than the federal government itself. This supremacy didn't happen by accident. Morgan possessed a deep-seated belief that free market competition was chaotic and dangerous. To him, capitalism required strict authoritarian order. His solution was Morganization. He aggressively bought chaotic, overlapping competitors, forcing them to merge into unified conglomerates. He didn't just buy shares. Morgan demanded obedience. He fired uncooperative executives and installed himself directly on the board of directors to dictate the company's direction. Challenging him in those boardrooms was nearly impossible. Morgan was a towering figure with an aggressive speaking style and a severely disfigured, inflamed nose caused by a condition called rosacea. He weaponized this terrifying physical presence to crush any dissent. By seizing control over 1/3 of all American railways, Morgan established himself as a dictatorial sovereign of American industry. But in 1901, an assassin's bullet put Theodore Roosevelt in the White House. Roosevelt looked at Morgan's unchecked power and immediately recognized it as a direct threat to the sovereignty of the state. The new president ordered his Justice Department to file a massive antitrust lawsuit against Morgan's Northern Securities Corporation, intending to forcibly break up the monopoly. Morgan was entirely dismissive of the legal attack. He didn't view the President of the United States as his commander-in-chief. He treated Roosevelt like a rival CEO who was simply getting in his way. While fighting the government in court, Morgan executed an incredible display of financial dominance. He met with Andrew Carnegie, asked the aging steel magnate to name his price, and agreed to buy out his entire empire on the spot. This scale comparison chart shows the staggering result. Morgan paid $480 million to create U.S. Steel, the world's first billion-dollar corporation. With a market cap of $1.4 billion, it completely dwarfed the combined $9 billion value of all other American manufacturing. Despite the government's attempts to restrain him, Morgan now essentially owned the two foundational pillars of the U.S. economy. He was too big for the state to control. 6 years later, the Panic of 1907 hit. The stock market plunged, businesses collapsed, and massive lines of terrified citizens formed outside banks to withdraw whatever cash they could before the vaults ran dry. Because America still lacked a central bank, President Roosevelt was forced to pause his antitrust crusade and ask his biggest rival to save the country a second time. Morgan summoned dozens of the nation's wealthiest bankers and trust directors to his private library on Madison Avenue to hash out a rescue plan. Once they were inside, Morgan employed his most ruthless tactic. He physically locked the heavy library doors, refusing to let a single person leave until they agreed to his exact financial terms. Morgan was 70 years old and suffering from a terrible cold, coughing and sneezing constantly. Yet he bullied the financial elite through the entire night until they finally submitted and funded the massive bailout. His hostile negotiation worked. Vast amounts of capital were injected into the failing trusts. Public confidence was restored, and the disaster was averted. The survival of the American Republic now literally depended on the hostage-style negotiation tactics of a single old man. The public's relief at the bailout quickly turned to fear. For the second time in a decade, they had seen that the entire economy hinged on the decisions of one unchecked individual. The resulting political outrage triggered the Pujo Committee hearings in Congress. Morgan was dragged into the spotlight and forced to publicly defend the reach of his Wall Street money trust. The immense stress and public scrutiny took a heavy toll. Morgan suffered multiple nervous breakdowns, his health rapidly deteriorated, and he died while on vacation in Rome shortly after the hearings concluded. The federal government responded directly to the power vacuum left by his death. By the end of 1913, they established the Federal Reserve. The true purpose of the reserve was to institutionalize the massive, centralized financial authority that Morgan had held personally, ensuring that it would reside permanently with the state. J.P. Morgan's career exposes the ultimate vulnerability of the state. Wealth becomes absolute power when the people who write the laws run out of money.